at Lafayette Park with Scott, enjoying this beautiful weather, and we're going to talk a little bit about business right now and professional life experiences. Thanks a lot for coming, Scott. Well, Scott, for how long you've been an entrepreneur?
Well, off and on all my life. The first company I started was when I was in college,
Great.
and that's a long time ago.
And what do you do today?
Um, Most of what I do today is what I call venture development. So that
Yes.
is helping people who are in the early stage of starting companies to get their company from point A to point B, wherever they are now, to where they want to be.
Great. And how many companies and entrepreneurs did you help so far?
Uh, Over my entire life, it has to be on the order of 100, maybe more.
Okay, and what do you see in these people? Like, what do they need the most usually?
It's totally dependent on the situation, the entrepreneur, the other people in the team, the particular market that they're going for, their particular product, their particular service, and everyone needs something different. So it's not a one-size-all-fits situation.
Great, and but do you see anything that is recurrent? Like, sometimes it's just that lack of confidence, maybe, or paying attention to the market.
Well, one thing that's fairly common is that entrepreneurs, unfortunately, aren't that great at presenting their idea.
Oh, this is a problem.
It's a big problem.
It's a
That's
big
why most
problem.
people don't get funded, right?
Yes.
So yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with you're too inside the problem. You live with it every
Oh,
day.
yeah.
You eat, sleep, and breathe it. You're motivated by something that excites you about how it's going to change the world, and that's where you're coming from as the entrepreneur. But it does. But people who are wanting to put money in, or might be your partner, they're looking for a certain set of things, to be communicated, to be explained. And it's just sometimes and often, a bit of a leap to get from that very inside the bubble experience
Yes.
to getting it into a format where people are used to seeing, that covers kind of the key bullet points they're looking for.
Yeah, you have the idea in your head, but you have to explain to other people. Yes, this is very important. And tell me a little bit about your path. Have you been a CEO or a founder before?
Right. I've been CEO. I've been part of a team of founders, and I've also been an advisor and a venture development executive, I guess I'd say, to several of them. And what I mean by venture development executive is that you go in, you analyze where the company is and what it is that they need to get from the stage that they're at now to their next stage of development. And then you decide, does it make sense for me to roll up my sleeves and take on part of this responsibility as sort of an interim executive executing a certain thing? Do we need to bring other resources to the table,
Yes.
whether that be capital, partners, some expertise, other team members, and essentially kind of put together a to-do list of what's required to get the company to the next stage.
Okay, and how did you jump from a CEO to a venture development?
In the times when I've been CEO, I either had an idea that I was very excited about and wanted to implement it, or I joined with a group of people, or an inventor, for instance, that had an invention who didn't have the ability to do the business side of the equation, and so then I would take on the CEO role. Venture development is essentially, you kind of look at it very much with the same perspective as a CEO would, but it's not your venture, and so that you can have a certain amount of objectivity about it and a certain kind of constructive criticism
Okay.
about what needs to be done. And sometimes you have to break some hard news to the entrepreneur and say, the idea is not that great, or you don't have the right business model, or no one's going to give you money unless you do A, B, and C. Being that sort of some people might call it adult supervision. Some people might call it the reality check.
Yes.
is part of what that responsibility is. So you don't, you got to be interested enough in the Kool-Aid, to think it's worthwhile, but you're not drinking the Kool-Aid the same way the CEO is necessarily.
Yeah, I can imagine it must not be easy to give that kind of feedback. As tough it is to hear about it, it must not be easy to tell other people like, I have to break your heart right now. This is not working. Yes. Do you have some sort of
After doing it
preparation?
after doing it for a while, it's not hard.
Okay, he's a heartbreaker of CEO. Okay, CEO heartbreakers. Yeah, got that. And I saw that you don't consider yourself a coach. It's about like venture development, but you also mentioned something like a spiritual coach. Do you
Uh-huh.
have like this connection with spirituality somehow?
Well, personally, I have a spiritual perspective, but I mean, what I mean by not being a coach, coach not being the right word, or that's also why I don't really like the word consultant, because what that implies is you're sort of giving advice, but you're not actively getting involved.
Oh,
Whereas
okay.
when you're doing venture development, you're figuring out where can I roll my sleeves up and get involved and actually do something that's bringing value to the company,
Okay.
and the it, in the places where you identify that a company needs some resources brought to the table that they don't have, then you identify those resources and help bring them to the table. And that's very different from what most consultants do, where they're basically, kind of saying, "Here's my recommendation.
Do
Have
this and
fun."
that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You help to put people together. You bring people together.
Yes, that's a big part of it.
Okay, this is great. And where are you from originally?
I grew up in rural Kansas.
Okay, and how long do you live here in San Francisco?
I've been here since 1989.
Okay, great.
I spent 10 years in Boston before that.
And when you were in Boston, you were working with startups as well?
I went to school, and then that's where I started my first company. And I worked for a couple of other companies when I was there. The only one that anyone would recognize would be Lotus Development Corporation, which did 123, which was the first app that really drove the personal
Wow.
computer business.
Great.
And that was a great experience. And so that's what I did. A little bit of working for other companies and some working for the company I started.
And do you realize any key differences between like Boston and San Francisco, for example, in this startup environment? Mindset, maybe entrepreneurial mindset, maybe.
Well, with the caveat that my direct experience in Boston is, ancient. California, not only in the startup realm, but at a lot of different levels and a lot of different ways, is very much on the cutting edge. There's a lot of invention that goes on here,
Yes.
and there's a lot of evolution of thought that goes on here. So it's more likely that the radical new idea is going to come from here, just because that's sort of the way the culture works. And also there's just there's such a density of talent and ideas and resources that there's a lot that catalyzes out of that. And I think someone recently I saw called it the collision density.
Collision density.
Collision
this is new.
density is important, which means you need to get a certain critical mass of activity happening. It's like getting a bunch of atoms in a bottle.
Yes.
Right, that you can shake up,
Shake
and
a
then
lot.
they run into one another, and there's all sorts of great things that happen when these different entities collide.
Yes.
And so Silicon Valley has a very high collision density.
Yes, because we can find all players here. The ecosystem is complete, and this
Yeah.
is what it makes a difference.
It's the most robust one in the world. So
Great.
yeah. So
And let's see, what do you believe that an entrepreneur needs to have to succeed in their business? It doesn't matter the business. It's really about the entrepreneur.
well, I think there are a lot of different types of entrepreneurs, and so
Tell me more about that.
Oh, I know I can give you a whole taxonomy, right off the top of my head, but venture capitalists learned this very early on, and this has been proven with research that one of the highest correlate between success and the highest correlate with success in a venture is how robust the team is. Do you have the right people in all of the critical seats in the team? Those are the teams that have the highest probability of winning. And I've seen CEOs with lots of different types of personalities, and as long as they're paired with someone that that kind of complements their weaknesses, or can do the things that they can't do well,
Yes.
and the team is fairly complete, then you've got the winning formula. But in terms of, generally, you could, another way of, when you think about maybe the core entrepreneur, the guy who's the founder, or the person who originally came up with the idea, and a lot of times these ventures are founded by small teams. There's not one person. But if you're really talking about the CEO person in that team, you got to have good vision.
Yes.
It's the old Gretzky thing of, you need to know where the puck's going to be, right, and be able to go there. And also, you need to be able to communicate that effectively on some level. And then you need to be able to motivate people to rally around that and align with you to accomplish what needs to be accomplished to make the venture successful. And those are some of the key attributes, I think, of the CEO entrepreneur.
Yes, and very challenging to motivate other people. Not easy.
Yeah. Well, it's the hardest job in the world to be to be the CEO. And if you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, that's a certain type of difficulty. If you're the CEO of a startup, that's another type of difficulty.
This is why there is a lot of failure.
Yes.
Do you see many startups failing?
Well, most of them fail.
Okay. And how is it like? Did you ever had to point out, hey, watch out, you're in the wrong path, you might fail?
Yes.
Yes, and
Often.
And could you save some of those startups, or they were like just stubborn and still going the wrong direction?
I would say you can save a minority of them.
Okay.
Okay, so there are certain ones where they're just not gonna. It's just not there. The product's not compelling enough.
Okay.
It's not differentiated enough. It's too crowded. Sometimes the entrepreneur just doesn't have the combination of qualities that's going to allow them to get through the things they need to get through to succeed. And so, even I have yet to see a formula. I'm hoping to see one someday. Where
there are a lot of books out there trying to get a fair formula.
Well, where the success rate is above 50%. Generally people are, kind of resigned to the fact that depending on the model, 60, 70, 80, 90%, and 60 would be a great, ratio, that are going to fail.
Yes.
And that's just part of the Darwinian process. That's look at evolution. Most species fail.
Yes,
that's the way it is.
And there is anything that you believe it's really important startups to keep in mind, like entrepreneurs and startups to keep in mind?
I guess the most important thing is the most important thing in the world is the customer. And this
Okay.
This is going to sound, there's no new news here, right? But so to the extent that one can, getting as much feedback and as much iterative feedback from the actual customer or customers, or maybe there's different sets of customers, but going out there and actually interacting with the market, getting actual feedback from the market is, I think, probably the most important thing. You have to have a vision, of what again, this whole, go to where the puck's going to be. And Steve Jobs said, we don't do market research because people don't know what they're going to want. I'm paraphrasing there, but it's like,
Yes.
People aren't going to say, give me an iPhone, please, right? And describe what it looks like. But if you've got enough of an understanding of what's compelling,
Okay.
and some vision into the future, then you can create something that once they get it in their hands, they go, wow, this is fantastic.
Yes.
And but you don't know that unless you've got some sort of feedback loop going on at some point in time. And a lot of people fail because they just don't connect enough with the actual customers and the actual market to get the type of feedback, or don't listen to that feedback well enough in order to course correct so that they get the product going in the right direction so it can be successful.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if it isn't dangerous to get like an investment as a validation. I mean, sometimes I see small startups that receive a seed investment, and they are like, "Oh, great! Our idea is awesome. We already have money, and now we're gonna rock." And then, it's gone.
Well, I always like to used to like to poke the bubble of people when they go, "Wow, we just got investment from some venture capital firm that's
Yes.
is supposed to be impressive, right?" And I go, "Congratulations, you now have a 70 to 80% chance of failing." Statistically.
This is a good one. This is awesome.
You just now the data's in, and 70-80% of the time you have a 70-80% chance of failing.
Okay. Yeah, I think this solves the problem. Yeah, pretty much. Yes. This is
Yeah.
great.
So no, I think it's again, it's all about the investors isn't the customer.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And a typical venture investor is wrong most of the time. And in fact, is it used to be a dirty little secret, but now it's quite well known that in fact most venture investors are a negative influence on the company.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and so these investors force the company to do things that are contrary to what's the proper growth path or the right organic growth path. Because they've got certain biases about what they want to see and how fast they want them to grow, and their view of the marketplace and what's motivating them, right, and what's driving them,
Yeah.
is very different from the things that are going to make the company succeed with the customer base. And so yeah, I think that's a neutral indicator, frankly.
Yes.
The fact that you've raised venture money, the only thing where it's not a neutral indicator is sometimes it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you've got 5 guys that all have essentially the same idea and one of them gets $20 million, well, if they don't completely blow the 20 million, they've got more resources to succeed if the other companies don't have the same amount of resources. So sometimes you have a self-fulfilling prophecy dynamic going on, as long as fundamentally what the company's doing is the right thing. But I've seen people many times that have kind of essentially the same idea as someone else. Someone else just happened to be a little faster, to the market, happened to raise more money, and they got the critical mass that was needed, and the other company did not.
And well, since that we're talking a little bit about investments, what is the first thing entrepreneurs have to do after they raise money?
The first thing,
Yeah, maybe.
take a deep breath.
Yes. I thought it could be that. Stop and think.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, again, it's hard to answer that question generically. I think it depends on where the
Depends of the
company is,
company, of
right, and
course.
where they are and what they need and what have you. But I think that they things are are different these days because you have this whole ethos of the lean startup.
Yeah.
Okay, so that has been a very good evolution of the whole venturing funding scene. That says let's go lean, right, and no frills, and very different from what happened in the bubble days, where it's like you got to go big quickly, and and a lot of the time the reasons why companies fail is they ramp up their expenses, and blow through their cash before they've had that opportunity to really validate themselves in the marketplace and get traction in the marketplace and what have you. So, I think, the first thing they need to do is just keep their feet on the ground. Don't get involved in the hype. There's also, something that happens in Silicon Valley is that people get validated by what press that they've gotten.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I like it that you're talking about hype.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. There's
Yeah,
a lot
well,
of
and it's
hype right now.
and that's called PR, right? And there's a lot of where that venture capital money goes is into PR companies,
Yes.
and then this is the whole the whole notion of declare victory, right?
Yes.
What you need to do is right off the bat is declare victory. We own this space. We're the leading company in,
Yeah.
right? And it's sort of positioning yourself, and just don't believe your own PR. It's very important to don't
Yes. In one
PR
of-
has a certain amount of value because you're trying to get your message out to the marketplace. You want to reach certain people, but don't drink your own bathwater. You got to. There's a reality that that is different from the PR version of things,
Yes.
and keeping one's feet on the ground about that is extremely important because people think like, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people sort of mentally, it's like, oh, we raised the money, now we've succeeded, right? It's like, no,
Yeah.
you're a long way
No,
from
no.
succeeding.
Yes.
And
there is an article actually from Paul Graham that says, "Don't do PR too soon." Because
exactly.
you get caught on that kind of hype, and
Well, then people open it up and there's no there.
Oh, yes,
There's
yeah.
nothing in the box.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree with him.
Oh, this
Yeah.
is great. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Very inspiring, and
Thank
I
you.
learned a lot. It was great, and thanks for coming here. It was great.
Thank you for having me.